Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to part 2 of my Melodic House Ableton template explanation. Basically, this template has been creating live during my live stream session. It's every 2 Mondays. You can come around, ask some questions, and see me creating track from scratch live. So last week we talked about the sound design and composition of each track, and this week we're gonna talk more about the global ID, the arrangement, automation, variation, and mixing and mastering. Alright, so let's have a listen how it sounds. Okay, so if I remember well, the idea started by finding a chord progression, and I used basically the push with a Maxwell Live device called Chordomatic until I found this chord progression. And yeah, it's kind of a electric keys type of sound. You have the arpeggiator in 16 mode, so you get this staccato effect on top of the sidechain. A really nice sound. And then, if I remember well, I had this up, which was kind of at the beginning a little bit of my main lead, or like pretty simple pattern. But yeah. And yeah, then I just built the track like this, and I needed to find kind of a lead. I didn't really find any kind of catchy melody to put on top of it. So I decided to go another way and more use kind of acoustic instrument and kind of make it a bit more orchestral, not orchestral, but like, yeah, using acoustic instruments. So that's why I use this grand piano kind of as my main lead to, yeah. That. And then once I had this, I played around that to have this part where it's gonna be more the piano, some part is gonna be more the harp playing, some part is gonna be none of it, or like a kind of deep, or kind of the perca. And the string as well would have this kind of cinematic effect. Then I built my track around that. And yeah, let's start from the beginning. So we have the intro where we start just with the chord, a bit of hats, and noise to glue everything. For 8 bar, and then we're gonna add some shaker and the bongo and conga. Alright, and then we go into the kick and the bass. So here, I'm gonna be honest, it was a bit tricky to make the transition between the intro and the kind of pre-chorus, because it's always tricky to know if you put hats and clap first and then the kick and the bass, if you add just the drums and the bass and then put the kick after. It was a bit tricky, but that's the way I found it, who was working the best. Actually, to don't put the clap, just having the hats, shaker and the perk, and then I bring the kick and the bass together in the same time. You can hear there is some SFX. Basically, I'm sending some of my shaker into a return track, which is kind of a washout effect, which kind of create this noisy, whooshy sound. And yeah, you can hear it's gonna be, this key one's gonna be slightly introduced. Now you can barely hear it, but it's gonna come. And then we're gonna progressively add some layer. You can hear it coming slightly. Then we're gonna add extra hats. Clap. And yeah, here you can consider the pre-chorus kind of done, and we enter in kind of the first chorus, or this was pre-verse and this is the verse. And we're gonna slightly introduce the harp. Then we go into the break. Okay, so for the break, here you can see it's kind of split in two parts. You will have the first part where I'm gonna slightly start to get rid of everything that kind of calming things down. To them, in the second part, I can bring something new and fresh, and kind of starting a new beginning, if I can say so. For the transition between where there is the kick and bass into a break sometimes can be abrupt. So that's why here I just removed the kick and the perk, but I leave pretty much anything else, including the bass, that I will remove just after. The thing is, if you start to remove everything, it kind of sounds abrupt and doesn't sound good. So progressively I'm starting to getting rid of everything. So first the kick and the perk, then here I'm gonna get rid of the hats and the clap, and then here of the bass and the chords, and where it's gonna be introduced here the new element, which are the piano and the string. And so it sounds like this. Kind of how mainly deriving this, the piano. The break is not too long. Okay, so one thing important I want to mention is the harp here. I kind of use it really, the harp, as well as the backbone of the track, but also to bring tension. By opening the filter, you hear it more and it kind of brings the tension, and then I bring it down to kind of reduce the tension. So yeah, I really use this to do that. Yeah, then we're gonna drop, you can see here some SFX. Basically, I'm sending the harp to a return with a reverse effect. I talked about it last week, but just you can hear. That's what does the effect. It's not like a big build-up drop. I wanted something more linear and smooth. And yeah, we're gonna start our drop with just the kick, no drums, the bass, just one of the chord, not the other. The reason being, here we're gonna introduce some extra strings, so which kind of take a lot of space as well, and take a lot of the same harmony and frequency range than this chord 2 was doing. It's also allowed to add a bit of variation. And yeah, so we enter in our kind of chorus. String SFX as well. Again, the harp building tension. So here you see I introduced after 8 bar the hats and some perk, and now I'm introducing as well even more drums, some shaker, the clap. I get rid of the key, but I bring this piano too, which is kind of a nice little melody riff. Okay, so here is kind of our second part of our chorus 1, and then we have a mini break here, and we're gonna go into our verse 2, where you can see we're gonna get rid of all of the main element. This is really the part of the track where we get rid of all of the main strong element, the lead, kind of give it a break a little bit, because if you always have the same element playing the whole track, it gets very boring. So just adding a bit of variation. It was also a part very rich of the track with a lot of things going on. Maybe now is the time to calm things down, having a moment a little bit more quieter. It's really nice in your arrangement if it does that, because you get something more dynamic with some high moment, some low moment. So yeah, it goes into the break. Bring back the perks, some hats to kind of bring some new fresh element that was not brought before here on the chorus, and you're gonna see I'm gonna get rid of most of the main elements such as the two pianos, some of the strings. Just the harp is still there, but though it's muffled as well because the filter is down, and yeah, sounds like this. Very calm moment. Here the string is kind of playing as a pad. Very minimalist on the drum, and then we go back to something a bit more groovier. Bring back our key we lost before. And here we kind of enter in our far break where we bring back our piano, we bring back our string too. Then we add this element that we never had before, which is just like again some string, bring at a very higher level, bring a bit of freshness, and then after play like this just with the kick, and then after you will have another part. So this is kind of final break. We had our verse 2, final break, and here we enter in our chorus 2, which is in two parts, one part without too much percussion and drum, and the part with a bit more percussion and drum. And yeah, so it goes like this. Final break. I didn't want it something too long, just like keep things going. Then after our momentum, the second part of chorus 2, we enter in the outro. So sometimes I would do a break and then like a final break and then go back into the outro. Here I just decided to make a longer outro where everything's calmed down. And here what I'm doing is I'm gradually getting rid of element and going to the exit of the track. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, in terms of modulation and automation, you can see I have mainly the harp. Basically the harp, like I said, was to bring tension, and like it's kind of like the orchestra chief. Like the guy, it's kind of him who decides when the moment is gonna be like exciting or when it's more like a quieter moment. So you can see here it's like down, so it's like the quieter part of the track. It's going up when you have the break and the build up. That's why it's going up. Really nice to use the harp as this. Here again you have automation on the gain of the keys just to introduce the sound a little bit more in the smoother way. But yeah, then here again, kind of I use the EQ as a low pass filter to kind of introduce the pad during the break. Yeah, that's mainly why I use automation on this track. Mainly is to introduce things or to remove them slowly. I use them a lot to send things into the return, so like to kind of create SFX. See here, I send my whole mix to this return, which is gonna create the washout effect. And same, you have a lot of elements that I use, especially I think the ARP, the keys as well on the other return, which is a reverse return effect, just to help the transition. That's work well. And then here's just the automation on the end, because otherwise the tail of the reverb and everything, the delay was so long, so I have to shut it down with automation. But yeah, other than that, there is nothing. Just the stereo width as well. I automate here. It's like a stereo effect. So basically at the beginning of the track, the hat, it's mono. But then when it goes the other shaker and the clap and everything, it goes stereo. It's just to leave space on the mix. So yeah, that's pretty much it about arrangement. And I was talking about mixing choice with this hat effect. So we're gonna talk about mixing. So you know, if you're familiar with my video, you know what I'm gonna say, that mix is 95% done with your sound selection, making sure you don't pick up too many elements which have the same frequency range, binding them properly as well, which is very important. Make sure they are at the right level, like the balance is really important. This is something often overlooked because we think what's gonna make the magic is the EQ, the compression, the distortion and whatsoever, but having first a right balance is a very underrated thing. But it's true that sometimes, for example, for a track like this where you have a lot of elements, for example the strings, the piano, they kind of all get the same frequency range, or for example I have the hats as well, they are all like more or less in frequency range. I kind of go a little bit more further with my EQ. But before to talk about EQ, I wanted to talk about delay and reverb that I use as well on the track. So that's something maybe unfamiliar with you, like a lot of people use as a return and send their track to a return with the reverb. But there is no good or wrong way. I just like to work like that. I just like to have each element with its own reverb. Now you can see that sometimes I use the same preset on different track, so I could use actually a return and send, but it's just my way of working. I like to do like that. But yeah, with reverb, usually I kind of have a three-dimension way of thinking about reverb. I will have the very close reverb, which is more like usually for the drum, for the hat, with like, yeah, the decay not too long. Like for example here on the clap, I have around 700 milliseconds. Usually the hats as well, I do that, all the drums and the perk. Now then can change, now depend of what you want to achieve. Like for example on this track, the hats, they have the reverb decay a little bit longer because was just sounding better. Because what's happening, especially in electronic music, is most of the time the reverb there kind of give a certain color to your sound and they give their characteristics. So you cannot really like make mixing decision with the reverb, because if you change too much your reverb, then you might lose this characteristic. Delays as well, let me talk about quickly, just to add a bit of rhythm, make things move. I talked about it last week about adding rhythm and the layer with the hat. Again, this is more like sound design purpose for me than really mixing, so that's why I don't really talk about delay and reverb in my mixing, because yeah, they are more sound design tool for me. Just what I can recommend is always being careful with the feedback, the dry wet for the delay and the decay and the dry wet for the reverb, because that's kind of thing that we tend to abuse, and that's the kind of thing that tend to let you sound with a longer tail, which kind of messed up with your mix. But again, always choose your creative choice over mixing choice, because if you change your delay and reverb for mixing purpose but then you lose the characteristic of your sound, then it doesn't work. Alright, that being said, I said I will talk about EQ. So yeah, like I was saying, in a track where there is a lot of elements which are taking the same frequency range, what I like to do is kind of doing surgical EQ, where I will boost a certain frequency to on each element. So like this, it kind of help popping up a little bit. So for that, let me show you with the hat. Here I accentuate this resonance of this hat. Here again, here it's more subtle, and then the shaker. You can hear how first I clean up a lot, then I accentuate a specific frequency that fits well the hat, and it also make it fit the track better. Now, how do you select this particular frequency? Then you just have to listen your hats in the context of the track and see like, okay, where do I boost and that really make it cut through the mix, and then leave it there. So I've done this for almost all elements. I've done it with the perk as well. Here, make it a bit more sharper. Here. Here, get rid of the low and boosting this one where here it's really well, I feel it's making the sound slap a little bit more. Obviously it helped cut through the mix, but yeah. And I boost all of the high clap. So this is a very weird EQ for a clap, I reckon. But probably... I boosted because I felt probably like the high was too dominant and I needed a bit more body. So I boost all of that and I said, okay, that's how it works. So... why not? Bass, I explained it, I think, last week, but here I have this particular resonant frequency because what's happening with this bass pattern is that basically the C note, when it plays, it's less powerful than the other two. So if you play this on the sub with speaker who have subwoofer, or maybe even on the headphone, you can hear it, but you will hear how the C1 is way much more weak, the note, than the other two, A and E. So listen to it without the resonance and you're gonna hear. You need to hear with speakers, not on headphone. Okay, now with the Q. This one. You hear the? Did you hear the difference? Without and with. So it kind of re-equilibrates in terms of energy of the bass line, because otherwise you have notes where you don't have that much energy and other ways you have a stronger energy. You can use a compressor as well. I just use this EQ. I found it work well. I just very narrow Q to just boost the 65 Hz. It's basically the frequency of the note C1. And yeah, obviously sidechain, this is something I take for granted now, but it's not really mixed. Here, to be honest, it's more like groovy and sound design purpose. Or this pumping effect, that's something we all like. And yeah, here, cut here. Somehow it's weird because the frequency it's happening here, like the sound, but cutting here kind of make it a little bit clearer. Yeah, it's pretty subtle, but you need to do this change because otherwise everything is playing in the same time and it kind of gets messy. Okay, here again some weird EQ. This you can hear like, it's like kind of getting muddy, but when I remove the frequency, it's very muddy, a bit more clear. And then boost, this is something when I need to add clarity, usually like you need to boost around everything which is above 1 kHz. Usually 1 kHz, 3 kHz, 5 kHz and 8 kHz work well, but obviously depending on your scent, that might be different frequency. But usually you always have like 1 or 2 frequency that if you boost them a little bit with an EQ, kind of make you sound shine. Great. Key was... Oof. Yeah, key, the thing is a marimba, so it's a resonant instrument, so obviously you're gonna have some resonance. So it's always hard to make it sound not too messy and not too resonant. And but yeah, just cut some frequency. Yeah, here I remember the trick I think I was doing is because obviously if you kind of cut this frequency here, it's like your resonant frequency, so you kind of get rid of the tone and the character of the sound, but trying to get the frequency right after this one, what was... So you clean up the thing. Obviously, you still get this resonance because it's a resonant effect. So like I said, you cannot get rid of it. Otherwise, you get rid of the character. But right after the resonance, I cut down and it was working. It was cleaning up a little bit. Obviously, it's nothing miracle, but... Yeah, and I had another one right after because I feel this part was like where it was already messy. And here it's kind of to soften a little bit the sound. The piano is not EQ'd. I could have tried, but I think, you know, when I feel like nothing is wrong, I just left it. I don't try to put an EQ just to put an EQ. Like you can see, I rarely use, I don't use compressor almost at all, except a bit of gluing with the drum bus or like the sidechain. On the piano too, yes, I did put, probably mainly because the overdrive as well was... Yeah, getting rid of this resonant frequency, and it's again like trying to boost the frequency. I feel like make the sound pop up in the mix. Usually I'm not that crazy with EQ, like I have some EQ where I just boost a little bit, but like I said, for this track, because it was a lot of things going on, I had to really like be more crazy with EQ and a bit more surgical. Here you see I haven't been too crazy, I just boost here the high end. Same here, I just cut, yeah, for the string section I didn't really EQ it because, I don't know, I just felt it was sounding good like this. And the amp obviously was the noise, so I kind of just, I think I used the rain sound and yeah, just filter it a lot with reverb. And this is like a Haas effect. It's like a use delay to create a very wide stereo image. And yeah, also what I've done is a bit of panning. You probably see, like, I think it was the harp, which is slightly pan on the left, and the piano too, which is slightly pan on the right. This again, because they were both in the center, and I feel like there was overlapping each other, so I slightly pan them. The thing with panning is often I found that when you start to pan, after it starts to sound weird because it's a little bit too on the left or on the right, and it doesn't really feel natural, but I just slightly pan them. It kind of worked for that track. Alright, that's pretty much it for the mixing. Now let's talk about mastering. I'm gonna choose this part, which is like kind of the busiest part. So for mastering, I use one of my rack. Basically, every time I do template, I was creating a mastering chain, and I decided to kind of make a rack because I was always kind of doing this using the same device. So this is what I call like a homemade mastering, and this rack is available for free, and I'm just going to explain a little bit inside what I've done. Here we have glue compression. So here on the glue compression, one of the main things is to EQ the input. Reason being that if you don't do that, is you low end who's gonna trigger the compression because it's the part of the track which got the most energy. So it's gonna mainly compress the low end, and you don't want that. You want a more cohesive things, so you need to kind of make sure that what is compressed, it's the whole mix. So you get rid of the low end, so that's what's not is triggering the compression, and what is triggering the compression is the rest of basically of the mix, and so you get a more cohesive compression, and it's glue everything better. You can see what's happening if you don't EQ, you get this pumping effect. So you might want that, but usually on the master you don't want that. So you EQ, so you don't get the pumping effect, but you still get some compression. And then in terms of settings, you usually have the attack around 30 milliseconds because you wanna, again, let the transient pass. You don't want your transient to be compressed because otherwise you're gonna ruin your transient. You don't want a too fast release, pretty long release here. And then same the ratio. This 10, you're gonna have something very strong, rather 2, something very soft, and 4 is in between. And I found this like the best for that. And then you just play with the threshold until you have your track is glue as much as you want. So yeah, and you compensate with the makeup gain. So that's what you do with the 2 macro here. Okay, then we have a bit of EQ, cutting everything under 30 Hz and everything above 16 kHz. And then I just remove a bit of mudiness here. Pretty subtle this. This air bass is not working, it's just to boost the bass in case. I have channel EQ that help me boost the mid-high. It's what is controlled by this high boost macro. So usually with this rack I always try to be gentle. Then you have utility who's gonna slightly enhance the width, and if you wanna put everything under a certain frequency in mono as well. Pretty subtle. For the width as well, I use the mid-side EQ because you don't really have like device to do some just like a mid-side processing or like proper stereo imaging in Ableton. So I kind of use the width enhancer in the utility and the MS mode of the EQ, which gonna kind of slightly improve the stereo, but yeah, it's very gentle. The thing is, it works when you have already a very stereo track. So like here, you can hear it. It's nice because it's enhanced a little bit because the track there is a lot of stereo. But a track where you don't have that much stereo by default, it's very, very hard to get just with utility and that. Then I have 2 saturation. Where I use a little bit. This is just too many. Make things a bit warm. Then you have 2 saturator. This 2 saturator is just to make things a little bit louder, to gain impressive loudness. Add a bit of warm as well. Alright, then you have color limiter, which is not really like as limiting, but I really like to use the saturation of it, and I just find this device add a bit of warmth and depth to the sound, add a bit of passive loudness as well. You're gonna hear. That's without. And with. It's very subtle. I could have had a bit more saturation, but I like to stay subtle for the mastering. And then I have 2 limiter, one after the other. It's just to be a bit more gentle. Here I didn't want it to squash too much neither. It's just basically some gain. You can see it's barely limiting. I didn't want it to really squash everything for this track. Yeah, to be fair, I really like the mix, and I haven't been too crazy with the mastering. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this track. You can grab the template, the link is in the description. It's a great way to support me. You can like and subscribe the video anyway, and see you next time for another one. Bye bye.